Welcome back to the Changemaker Podcast. I'm your host, Deke Copenhaver. Today, my guest is my good friend, my old friend, Mark Goulston. Mark is an American psychiatrist, executive coach, and consultant who's worked with Fortune 500 companies, universities, and other organizations. He is the inventor and developer of the process called surgical empathy, whereby using targeted and focused empathy, one is able to break through to people and free them from internal emotion and psychological blocks that can impair their functioning, well-being, and satisfaction in life. He's an all-around great guy. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Mark Goulston.
Welcome to the Changemaker Podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
Hey, Deke, my good friend. Looking forward to this, and let's provide value to your viewers and listeners as opposed to wasting their time.
I totally agree. I don't like to waste time. Speaking of which, there could be a little bit of a reason why neither of the two of us want to waste time. Obviously, I was diagnosed back during the spring with esophageal cancer, but you broke news the first time you were on my podcast that floored everybody listening, but you're dealing with some health issues yourself.
Yeah, so I mentioned that at that time I was diagnosed with lymphoma, and I have to admit that sort of numbed me. It knocked me for a loop, and but it's a kind of background lymphoma. It's the kind of lymphoma that people live with for years, and we were waiting when it would act up and I would start treatment. But something that we've diagnosed in the last 5 months is I have something called MDS, myelodysplastic syndrome, and that I have high-risk myelodysplastic syndrome, and untreated, I have a prognosis of 5 months to 4 years with a median life survival of about 2 years. But because it crosses over into something called AML, acute myeloid leukemia. And so I'm taking a medication to see if we can stall that, because the definitive treatment is a bone marrow transplant, and a bone marrow transplant is an organ transplant. Just like a heart transplant, they take out all your marrow. And fortunately, my kids are all donor matches, so we don't have to go looking for that. But it's not a walk in the park. I mean, I'm positive, but what's more amazing is I'm the calmest, most content, and most at peace I've ever been in my life. The prognosis is if we do the bone marrow transplant, there's a 20% chance of dying during the procedure. I'm 75.
Wow.
And if I get through it, there's a 50% survival rate, which I believe means in 5 years, there's a 50% chance I'll still be alive and 50% chance that I won't be. But I've been doing interviews because people seem to be kind of intrigued with my state of mind, because happy is not the right word. I'm not happy that I have this, but I am so calm. I'm so at peace. And what's interesting is I don't think I've ever felt this way in my entire life. So the prospect of dying is giving me peace of mind and contentment that living never did. And I'm sharing it. I've created a bunch of videos. They're very raw. You can go to YouTube, Mark Goulston, and I'm dying to tell you videos. They're unedited, unscripted, first take. I don't even know how to eliminate the Fathom note taker from the video if you go look at it, because every day I'm just learning things about life that I want to share with the world. So the first episode is called Michelangelo Dying, because Michelangelo famously said, "I saw the angel in the marble and I carved to set it free." So for me, Michelangelo dying is, I've eliminated everything that's unimportant in life. So I carved away what's unimportant. And there's a lot of stuff we do that's unimportant. And when you carve away everything that's unimportant, what's truly important glows. And I'm not kidding, it glows. And so that's the first episode. And I'm sharing them because, I wish I had learned that, before I was facing mortality.
It's interesting. So for our viewers and listeners, you and I have been friends for years, but when I was told, I'll never forget, it was a Thursday afternoon in April. And so I had an endoscopy. And so, no, I hadn't had an endoscopy. It was a CT scan. But so my ENT, who's a good friend of mine, Dr. Glenn Owen, I said, well, how'd everything come out? He said, well, why don't you meet me at your house? I said, well, I'm having a glass of wine. You just want to stop by here? He's like, no, I really want you to meet me at the house. So I'm like, okay, that's throwing up a red flag if he wants to tell me in person. But when he told me I had a tumor and that it could be cancer, I was thrown for a loop. It's kind of like, first thing is, am I going to die? But one of the first people I called was you. And that weekend, my wife and I had gone up to a hotel for the weekend. And I tell people there was laughing, crying, there was just such doubt. But I'm like, I got to call Mark because, he's a world-renowned psychiatrist, but he's also somebody who's dealing with an illness as well. So I wanted to personally thank you for helping me through that weekend. But it's kind of the same thing as you. When I got the diagnosis, I just had a sense of peace and calm come over me. And one of the things I've tried to do is really, because I know not everybody that has cancer, and I'm sure you know this well, has that spirit of peace and calm. So I've made it sort of my mission to share that with other people who are going through the same experience. So I went through 5.5 weeks of chemo and radiation therapy back during the spring. Well, now been to MD Anderson twice. They found no cancer. So I'm on an intense immunotherapy and chemo treatment once every other week. But before we started the treatment, my wife and I were having lunch the Sunday, and I said, Lisa, I'm actually kind of looking forward to going back through chemo. And she goes, oh my God, do not tell me that you prayed to go through chemo. I said, no, but just all the wonderful people we met and the connections we made and just that bridge of empathy with people going through, and that you get to share your peace and your calm, which I'm sure you do as well. It helps me heal.
Well, let me ask you something. We also need a little bit of humor, if you're listening or watching this.
Oh, yeah.
When you get older, one of the last things you want to hear from your doctor is, we need to run some more tests.
Yes.
And that's what happened to me. My internist said, it's probably nothing. I did a CAT scan for the lymphoma and thought there might be something. And then we did a PET scan and the lymphoma was all over me, but it was a kind of a quiet one. And it was the bone marrow biopsy that revealed this other condition. And something else. Here's why I am at peace. Here's my latest rendition, but I'm learning more. there's a couple of things that I think have contributed to my peace of mind. There's something that I call, like I have Michelangelo dying, I have something called visionary dying, because I know the way visionaries think, Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, and they have something called the 3Ds, which I applied to dying. And the first one is they define reality out beyond what anyone can imagine. So that's a personal computer, that's an iPhone, that's a Tesla, that's a SpaceX. And the second D is they declare their intention, we're going to do this. And the third D is they decide on a strategy, this is how we're going to do it. And then when they get big enough, they assign all the people stuff to their operations people. So for me, I defined reality by identifying what dying well is. And for me, it's, I don't want too much pain and suffering. I don't want to be a burden to the people I love. I don't want to be a burden financially. And when my wife told me that she'd be fine, I cried for half a day. Third, I'm a serial creative. And so I'm the creative lead of about 6-7 projects. So I don't want to leave them hanging. You know, I want them to go on if I'm not around. And then the fourth thing is I'm sharing what I'm learning through all this. And I feel a sense of urgency and also what I've learned in 50 years. And the fifth thing, which is the most difficult thing for me, is I'm letting people care about me. I've always had trouble letting anyone care about me because I'm a doctor, I'm a therapist, I'm the caretaker. Yeah. And I'll share something with you that when I shared with people who I have a sense might care about me, and they'd say, "How you doing, Mark?" Instead of saying I'm fine, I would say, "Well, I'm dealing with a few things." And then when I talked about it, there was something about their caring that caused me, as I was sharing it, to just feel vulnerable. I'd start to cry, appreciative, and embarrassed. So I would apologize. I'd say, "Oh, geez, I'm so sorry. You know, I didn't mean to get emotional." And I will tell you, because I think you're going to answer the way they did. They said, "Do not apologize. Do not apologize. It's really kind of an honor that you're sharing this with me the way you're sharing it with me." Some people have said, "This is the most intimate conversation I've had in months." And very busy people who, you know, if I reached out to them for anything, you know, I could never get through to them. But I think the gift of this being such an intimate conversation, I would say 80 to 90% of them said 24/7. And I said, "What does that mean?" And they've said, "You can call me 24/7.
Yep.
And you can call me 24/7, Deke. And I'm guessing you would give me the same offer."
I absolutely would. But Mark, so you referenced humor. And I'm like, you know, I think anything in life, if you can poke fun at it, and some people would be like, you know, how do you make fun of cancer? Well, so when I was first diagnosed, I went to my dentist and my hygienist cleaned my teeth. You know, they're always sticking the thing in your mouth. She goes, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, you know, other than the cancer, I'm great." She's like, "It's too soon for that." But I will tell you another funny story. So, you know, God forbid, about a month ago, I come down with COVID. And fortunately, it was mild. I got on Paxlovid quickly. And so I had a low-grade fever for a couple of days. But so I'm in bed. And I'm watching TV. And the commercial, which you may have seen, comes on. It says, "Well, the pandemic may be gone, but COVID isn't. It's still in the top 5 diseases killing people in the United States. It's number 1. Number 2, cancer being number one. And I'm like, thank you for giving me all that confidence. I got the top two at the same time. But you got to laugh. I'm like, you just can't make this stuff up. But no, I mean, using that humor. But I want to talk to you about that because I had a memory of you used to do a radio show in LA and you had me on as a guest. And it was like you and who were your co-hosts? I'm like, I thought it was freaking brilliant. And when you interviewed me, I had a friend of mine here in town go, man, I heard you on that show. That's my favorite show I listen to all the time. So sometimes, I mean, it makes strange bedfellows, but I don't think anybody would think of the concept that you had for that radio show.
Well, it's called My Wakeup Call. And what it's about is, and we're up to 550 episodes. It's in the top 1% globally. It's in 29 countries. And it's all word of mouth. I'm just 75. I don't have a social media team. And I get 40 requests to be on it a week. And basically, I say, unless you're an A-lister like Jordan Peterson or Chris Voss, who I've had on, or Ken Blanchard, I'll give them a pass. But what I've said, because I get too many requests, is you need to support it on your end. We'll post it.
Yeah.
And you need to, I don't really do social media, and you have to share it. But I got to go back to the humor thing because I want to give you another bit of a chuckle. So one of the biggest challenges is access to healthcare. Once you get to the doctor and they connect with you as a person, you're good to go. But I met with one of the lead people at City of Hope, and City of Hope is like MD Anderson. It's in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And then there's another hospital, Cedars-Sinai, which is amazing. And I went to City of Hope to see about clinical trials beyond what was going to be recommended. And there weren't any that they could find. So I'm doing what was recommended. And, but I'll tell you, it's the care I'm getting from both those places, but it's mainly at Cedars-Sinai, is so remarkable that, after I met with my hematologist, I said, I got to tell you, in terms of the peace of mind you're giving me, I said, I might write a book called Win, Lose, or Die, I'm Good to Go. And we bonded. We bonded. I mean, he emails me from vacation. I mean, it's crazy.
No, I'll share, because you mentioned MD Anderson. That's where my surgeon is. As I say, we visited there 2 or 3 times. 2 times in July, they found no cancer. But the second time, they did a CT scan. And so usually with esophageal cancer, they treat it. Hopefully it's gone, but they still do surgery to take out, as a precaution. But so the nurse came in and she's like, came back, no cancer. So I'm assuming you're going to go through surgery and everything. So I'm mentally preparing myself, because that surgery, it's like you're in the hospital for a week. I mean, it's serious too. So I'm like, okay, I'm mentally preparing myself for that. Then my surgeon walks in and he looks at me and he goes, well, Mr. Copenhaver, I have to say, you're a conundrum. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean, man? You're saying I'm a conundrum? He said, well, we can't find any cancer, but where it was located, I could damage your windpipe. And if there's nothing there, I don't want to do that. But I told my wife, I'm like, okay, I guess being a conundrum is a good thing. I'll take that as a compliment at this point. But it was the last thing. You mentally prepare yourself for one thing, and then it's like totally different. I'm like, what the hell, man? But you got to roll with punches.
Absolutely. I remember on my wake-up call, one of my guests, a very well-known speaker, is a woman named Sam Horn. And my guest opened up to me, and I guess she wasn't there pushing, her trainings and whatever. She opened up and she said, I had this crazy experience. She said, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And, and I was going there for the evaluations and whatnot. And I'd be sitting in the clinic and there'd be people around me, with cancer, going through it without any hair. And she said, a month into it, they said, we've made a mistake. You don't have cancer.
Oh, wow.
And she went into a huge depression.
Oh.
And we drilled down, and she said, I was all prepared to fight this thing. And then when I realized I didn't have to fight it, and all those other people who had cancer, a number of them were going to die. And it was like I was all prepared to fight the cancer. And I'm a fighter by nature. I like a good challenge. And then when I found out that I was cancer-free, it's almost like I went into free fall. And so it's interesting the way our mind works, and we prepare ourselves mentally. And I'll tell you, for me, it's like a fascinating puzzle. And maybe how you felt about the chemo, I was waiting for about 3 months before we finally decided to start treatment with a medication. And I was kind of chomping at the bit because, and everything I'm doing has a risk. The bone marrow transplant for someone my age, has a risk, but it could save my life. The medication I'm taking, if it doesn't work, we won't know for 4 months. And that's 4 months of valuable time when when my illness is accelerating. And then if the medication I'm taking pushes off the bone marrow transplant for 1.5 or 2 years, I could be too old for a transplant because I'll be 77 and, I'll probably have other medical conditions. But I'm just fascinated. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. And I'll share something else that's given me peace of mind. So I have this idea of what dying well is, and I've checked all the boxes. But something else, and I'm sharing this with you, listeners and viewers, not to depress you. I hope you'll maybe be inspired as opposed to depressed by what Deke and I are talking about. But I figured out what my values are in life. And my deepest value is kindness and sacrifice, because someone did that for me when I was going through a rough period in medical school, and I think he saved my life by kindness and sacrifice. He fought the medical school to keep them from kicking me out when they wanted to, because he saw something in me that I guess other people didn't. And I just paid that forward after I, took a second leave of absence, came back, finished, became a psychiatrist, focused on suicide prevention. And none of my patients died by suicide in 35 years, and I just paid it forward. And so, but those values of kindness, personal sacrifice, curiosity, get stuff done, take personal responsibility. I don't make excuses. I don't blame. I don't complain. And I've lived all those values my entire life. And so if I'm heading to the end of my life, I'm in alignment with my values. Whereas I used to do house calls to dying patients, some of them really rich and powerful. And they weren't dying so well because they were out of alignment with the values that they wished they had had. So a number of them were incredibly rich and powerful, but at the end, they weren't close to other people. They didn't trust other people. Their children didn't know who they were. They didn't know who their children were. And when all was said and done, they hated screwing up and not having enough time to fix it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good thing to identify what your values are And now some listeners might say, well, my values are to get rich. I want to be the guy or the woman who has all the toys. Well, I'll tell
Yeah.
you, someone like me might be doing house calls to you at the end, and you're thinking,
Exactly.
yeah, that wasn't so cool.
No, it's so I had a minister friend of mine that said, I think this is one of the best points of view. He said, worldly things are like Chinese food. You get full pretty quickly. Hour later, you're hungry again. And I'm like, that's so true. But you have to, I mean, I look for the silver lining and everything. One of the things that I've realized is I'm like, you know what? So I'm still doing keynotes. I'm still doing the podcast. I'm speaking next week for the National Governors Association. But I said, and my work starts with us and, trying to heal the divides in the nation. I said, but I can say things now that a lot of other people are thinking, but probably wouldn't be comfortable saying. And it's like, okay, come back at me. You going to pick on the kid with cancer? So it's been freeing in that way. But I will tell you about the kindness. So last week at chemotherapy, I had this experience. So they were taking my blood and everything. Older gentleman, they're doing the same thing to him next to me. And he said, I want to shake your hand. You were the best mayor we ever had. So I went around the corner to get weighed. And he's like, nobody ever had a problem with that man. The nurse waiting on him said, I tell everybody who comes in here that. And then another nurse chimes in and said, he's just a good Christian man with a good heart. And I was like, y'all, I'm not going to leave today. I'm just going to hang out with y'all all day. But then when I was leaving, I said, look, I walked right past that room again. I said, I got to give you guys hugs. So I hugged, everybody in the room. The nurse that had attended to me was attending to somebody else. And she said, wait a minute, you didn't hug me? I said, well, I thought you were busy. So I went over and gave her a hug. And then the patient, I'm like, would you like a hug too? She said, yeah. And I told my wife, I'm like, that experience, at the Augusta Oncology Center just made my day. I'm like, you can look for the bad, but just stuff like that. It's like, life is not that bad if you look for the good.
One of the other lessons I learned, and it's up at the YouTube, I believe, I'm dying to tell you, is I'm really blessed. I've been a wonderful wife who, I have a saying, when you're tolerated by your partner, it feels bad until you realize how difficult you are, and then it's a gift.
Yes, I would agree.
There you go. And so I have a wonderful wife, 3 grown children. They're launched. I'm blessed to have 4 grandchildren, 4.5 and under, and they come over every day because we have a pool and a driveway. So my wife was right about keeping the house because, if we got an apartment, the kids would get restless. And so one of the lessons I've learned since this is I always make it a point to get home between 4 and 5:30 when they visit. And when they visit, nobody talks to me, nobody looks at me, nobody asks me anything because, my wife and my daughters, they're caught up with the details of the day that, I don't really understand. And I went through this transformation. So this is what I want to share with you and your viewers and listeners. I remember there was one time in the kitchen where, I'm not being included. And if I was my grumpy father, I think I said it. I said this pathetic thing once. I'm going to go check my email, because nobody's talking to me. It was so pathetic. I only did that once. And then I got a clue. That there might be something else going on, because even though they weren't paying attention to me, I picked up my phone to look at it, and everybody gave me the stink eye. What are you looking at your phone for? I mean, my wife and children, they're multitasking, and I thought, well, there may be something more here. And so then my next step was I put the phone down when I'm with them because it's very important for me to be around them. And I thought, I'm still checking in my mind. I wonder if I got any emails, text messages. I got a lot of stuff going on. And I thought that was pretty crappy. And then the next step, this was the breakthrough, is I'm going to totally rid my mind of anything connected to my ego, anything connected to my ambition. And I'm just going to sit there because my grandchildren would occasionally look at me. And when they looked at me, I would bathe them in utter delight. Bathe them in utter delight. And when you bathe another person in utter delight with no agenda, they take a second look. They take a second look, which shows you how rare it is for people to feel bathed in utter delight. And so one of the things I'm doing that I'm recommending to our viewers and listeners, you can do this elsewhere. Next time you're at a restaurant, if the waiter or waitress says to you, maybe at the end, is there anything else? You look at their name tag and you say, yeah, Joey, one other thing. And they're going to look at you, worried that they're in trouble. And you look them in the eye and you say, Joey, yeah, hey, thank you. So and you bathe them in utter delight and they go, oh, okay. And then on a number of occasions, you watch them leave the table and you see them like shake their shoulders like, what the heck was that?
Yeah.
And it's good. It's not a bad, what the heck was that? It's so rare.
That's, back to kindness. But as we sort of get towards the end, I do want to share with our viewers and listeners how we met. So I believe it was 2016. I was speaking in Los Angeles for an organization that you're a member of, MEDAL, Media and Entertainment and Technology Alpha Leaders. So we met that Saturday, and then we met again before we did a hike. And so we spent, hours hiking through the mountains, talking to each other, and just bonded over that. But I don't know if you remember this. So I remember also that before the meeting started, a guy stood up and he said, okay, I guess people make announcements. He said, okay, everybody, I've got tickets to the Grammy pre-party at the Playboy Mansion on Monday. So if anybody needs them, and I looked over at another guy that was in town from Kansas. I'm like, it was Valentine's Day when we met. I'm like, my wife gave me a hall pass not to be home on Valentine's Day. I think if I call her and tell her I'm going to the Playboy Mansion, she might not want me to come home. But I told my wife that story. I told her about going to she's like, what, are you crazy? You had a chance to go to the Playboy Mansion and you didn't take it? Watching, Secrets of the Playboy on A&E, I'm glad I didn't go. But our first meeting, that was just a memorable weekend all the way around.
No, I felt that also because, look, you were one of the speakers. You were this great mayor of Augusta, and you were a superstar. And I was just some member of the organization, and I really valued the conversation and the depth of it, and also if you're listening or viewing this. And try to be aware of this. Sometimes you have a conversation with someone like you and I had, and it crosses over from a conversation into, I think we could be friends.
Yep.
It's like, this is going well. This Mr. Mayor and me just, Joe Lunch Bucket in this organization, we could actually develop we could actually develop a friendship, and given that the Surgeon General Vivek Murthy said loneliness is epidemic, change that. I'll give you a tip because people like tactics. So I'm an introvert. I push through it when I give talks, but I'm an introvert. And one of the tactics that I use that gets people to open up is when I'm talking to people, if I can ask them a question where they say, I think this, I feel this, this is what I would do. So when you get someone to express a feeling, a thought, or an action, they feel known by you. Because a lot of times conversations are just one channel. For a lot of men, it's, I think this, I do this, I think this, I do this. And for women, they're not afraid to talk about feelings. But all of us are made up of those three dimensions. And if you can get the other person to talk about those and then ask them to say a little bit more. Well, say a little bit more why you think that. Oh, say a little bit more about why you would do that. I am telling you. So I've used that as an introvert, and people just feel known by you. Yeah. I've had people take my hand with two hands and say, it was really great meeting you. So just a little tip.
Well, Mark, as we get down to the end, 2 questions. Where can people find you?
So I'm in a lot of places. I have 400 and some odd thousand Twitter followers. My LinkedIn profile is pretty good. But something I'm proud of is if you go to ongloballeadership.com, and DCI is On Global Leadership /DCI is the Deeper Coaching Institute. And it's for people who want to go deeper. So a lot of people get coaching and they discover something about themselves that opens all kinds of doors, and they want to go deeper. And because of my background and my curiosity, and I guess my manner, people just open up. Whereas a lot of people who don't have a therapy background will say, oh, you have limiting beliefs, or you might want to learn some emotional intelligence, which is all good. But when I'm in conversation with people, like when we were doing a hike, people just open up. And what's interesting is when people feel safe with you, they start to open up about their hangups, and they feel free. So go there. And then Amazon, I got 10 books there, and my Wakeup Call is my podcast. And if you go to YouTube, I'm putting up these I'm dying to tell you videos.
Okay. On a daily basis, what puts a smile on your face and brings joy to your heart?
Kindness. When I see kindness, when I see my children who are very busy, when I see them being kind to people that can do nothing for them, I say to myself, you may have done a good job.
Well, Mark, thank you for being an outstanding guest again. And I do want to say, as we close out, Joe Lunchbox, you're a best-selling author. You're a world-renowned psychiatrist. You are a keynote speaker. You ain't no Joe Lunchbox, but you're also humble. But, man, thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for being my friend.
Thank you for being my friend. Well, that's all the time we got. Dropping the mic, and we are out.
Hey, guys, thanks for listening to or watching the Changemaker podcast today. Greatly appreciate it. If you're listening and you want to see the video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deke Copenhaver. That's pretty easy to remember, I would think. But really, we also want to remind you to like, subscribe, rate across all platforms, download. And if you're looking for a coach, a speaker, or anything, you know where to find me. Just email me at me@dekecopenhaver.com. And thanks so much for listening.